How's it going, everybody? This is Pac-Man Jake back with another video. The day before the Packers do battle against the Houston Texans, going up against a 1-5 squad in Houston at Energy Stadium. Now for the video at hand. Is it time to fire defensive coordinator Mike Pettine? And is the defense really, honestly, worse than it was last year? We're going to find out, and we're going to go through stats and other observations to come to the conclusion on whether the Packers should move on from Mike Pettine after 6 weeks of play, and is the defense really worse than it was at this time last season? Now we get a side-by-side comparison here of all the major defensive stats from last year's to this year's. From the total defense, you can see that there's a small difference where the Packers have actually given up less yardage. The points, there's a bit of a discrepancy here where the Packers have only given up 19.2 points per game, which ranked 8th, and then this year it's got a really big increase to 27.8, which ranks 20th. And then we go to the interceptions. The interceptions category is not looking great so far when you look at it from first glance. With the 2 interceptions compared to 7 last year, think about the quarterbacks that we've had to face. We've had to face quarterbacks that just generally don't turn the ball over. Drew Brees, Tom Brady, Matt Ryan. The 2 quarterbacks that we did get interceptions off, Matt Stafford and Kirk Cousins, we got those picks. So those are probably the more turnover-prone quarterbacks. Whereas Drew Brees, Matt Ryan, and Tom Brady, they just take care of the football. So that might be the reason why the interceptions are lesser this year than they were last year. Off to a really, really great start, where the Packers have had to face some more turnover-prone quarterbacks like Mitchell Trubisky, Kirk Cousins, Joe Flacco, Dak Prescott, where Dak Prescott had 3 interceptions last season. So that is almost half of the amount of interceptions from the 7 that we got through 6 weeks. And then going to the sacks, I really feel like this is kind of not too big of a deal. The Packers are getting sacks. They are getting to the quarterback. When looking at the pass defense, yardage-wise, the numbers are nearly identical, but the completion percentage per game for quarterbacks, 57.89, which ranks 5th in the league last year through 6 weeks, compared to 70.19, which ranks now 28th in the league. So that means that the quarterbacks are completing more passes at a more efficient rate than they were last year. Then when you look at the touchdowns, the fact that the defense has given up 3 more touchdowns in less games, in 5 games, as opposed to 6 games from last year, that has been a part of the problem with the pass defense. And just by looking at all of these numbers here from the major pass defense stat categories, that the pass defense is a little bit worse. As for the run defense, it's quite frankly a little bit different. Last year, the Packers have given up a little bit more in yards. This time last year, ranking 23rd at 124.5 yards, whereas this year it's a little bit better at 116.2. Although otherwise the yards per run are the same, and the touchdowns given up is the exact same. It's pretty safe to say that the run defense really isn't all that much better than last year's run defense, and it still continues to be a problem for this team. But in all reality, it's kind of hard to expect much greater results, because this is really largely the same defense that we had last year. Now onto something that is not really measured by stats, it's just by observation. When you watch the games and then you go back and you watch to see how players are doing, and then you just kind of like things that just come right off and just bounce right in front of you. And one of the major things is that the pass rush has regressed significantly. I mean, the sacks are coming, but I'm talking about the consistent pressure coming from our outside pass rushers and inside pass rushers. The pass rush is just lacking, and it's even coming from Zadarius Smith, whose pressure rate just isn't really where it was last year, where he was coming out strong right out of the floodgates, and he was just smothering quarterbacks, not just stacking quarterbacks, smothering quarterbacks. He was just putting so much pressure on opposing quarterbacks to where him and Preston Smith were just dominant forces on the edge for the Packers. And that's another thing is that Preston Smith. I don't have no idea what's going on with Preston. He has regressed not only in pressure rate, but also the sacks are not coming for him either. He only has half a sack this season, which he split with Rashawn Gary, who has got off to a pretty hot start before an ankle injury kind of cooled him down. So maybe once he's 100% again, maybe some outside pass rush can come from Rashawn and maybe help bolster the pass rush that is severely lacking outside right now at this very juncture. The inside pass rush coming from our interior defensive linemen, Kenny Clark, Tyler Lancaster. Tyler has actually done pretty well. It's kind of hard to tell because he just doesn't really leap off your screen, but he has been able to make some plays. Or it's just the fact that the guys are just not running, just simply not winning their one-on-one matchups, and they just need to do a better job of that and kick it into high gear, and you just go get the quarterback. This defense going forward will have to get after the quarterback in order to be able to have a chance to be able to stop the pass better, and most importantly, keep points off the board and give the ball back to your offense. And the second noticeable thing is not creating turnovers. This kind of more goes back to the stat sheet, but when you take a look at it, the ability to create turnovers is really lacking from this defense as opposed to it was last year where this defense was creating turnovers left and right. But when you go back and you watch the games, or when you've watched the games, the opportunity in creating turnovers just hasn't come to the Packers at all this year, really. There was just the two interceptions, one by Jair Alexander and Chandon Sullivan. Otherwise, it's not really coming for anybody in the secondary, or even our linebackers are not getting in there and not really doing much of anything to help create turnovers. I don't know if players are just not in positions to be able to get some interceptions. Our safeties, our corners, maybe the fact that the football is not really going to Jair very much could be part of the reason, because his coverage is so good. The same goes for Chandon Sullivan. You don't really hear much, you don't really see much of him off the screen. Maybe it's due to the fact that his coverage has been so good. And as far as Kevin King goes, he's probably the cornerback that quarterbacks want to pick on the most, and they most certainly did that last season. But that has enabled Kevin to be able to make some plays on the ball, grab some interceptions last season, and that has been really, really good. And the opportunities for Kevin aren't there either. Maybe Kevin is doing better in coverage, but for some odd reason, this is just not really a playmaking defense this year like it was last year. And then that leads me to my last point. The best players are off to slow starts. This is probably just about everybody here that I just mentioned earlier, which was the Smith brothers, Darius, Preston, Kenny. They're all off to slow starts through 6 weeks. And our safeties, Darnell Savage, Adrian Amos, they are just not as good as they were last year. Darnell Savage was definitely very promising, talented, but he's been missing some tackles, and that has been a problem with this defense, is missing some tackles. Even Adrian Amos and some of our more sure tacklers have missed a few here and there. I'm hoping that the guys can rally together, and then the coaching can get together and figure out some better game plans, get back to something that was working last year. And so far, whatever is going on to start this season isn't working as well as we kind of expect. I know that the Smith brothers are the guys that definitely set the bar quite high, and last season they set it really high. So with this defense looking worse, let's come to the conclusion here, and I've come to the conclusion that yes, this defense is looking worse, but it's still early. It's still early in the season. There's a lot of football left. We got Week 7 coming up tomorrow against the Houston Texans. There's a chance to be able to turn it around. Adjustments can be made easily. Like I said, I think I think when you go this game, this shellacking against Tampa Bay really truly could be a wake up call for us. It really could. It's going to be a wake-up call for the offense for sure, and hopefully it's going to be a wake-up call for the defense. I just don't think that firing Mike Pettine in season won't make a really big of a difference. I really feel like when I take a look at this roster, it certainly has some talented players. Kenny, the Smith brothers, Adrian Amos, Darnell Savage, Chris Barnes. I just feel like there are definitely some pieces that are just missing to this defense, and I just don't think that just firing one coach is going to change much of anything. I'm just not sure that this is really the right time to just give up on Pettine. And the last point that I want to make is that this defense, under Mike Pettine, has been capable of dominating. We saw this last season right from the get-go, even though it was against a really bad offense in the Chicago Bears. But when we saw this defense clamp down, only giving up 3 points, that game right there showed me that this defense has the look of being dominant because the pass rush was there. The rush coming from the Smith brothers was suffocating. It was suffocating against the Bears. It was suffocating against the Minnesota Vikings. It was suffocating against the Denver Broncos. It was good against the Cowboys, even though they scored a lot of points. But the defense created turnovers in all those games. But right now, consistently, I've seen from the defense, it hasn't been really consistently horrible, but it hasn't really been consistently good. And I just don't know what to make of it. I just don't think that all of this is Mike Pettine's fault. He is only one of the defensive coaching staff members. There's other guys involved. So with all of that, I will catch you guys later for tomorrow's game. Go Pack, go.